Welcome to the Red Half of Sheffield preview pod, match day 5. And oddly enough, next one up on the docket is Hull City. I am joined by Alex, who prior to recording, we were talking about this because I'm in the States covering Sheffield United. Alex is in Australia and he covers Hull City. Alex from the Hull City AFC Aussie podcast. How are you doing on this late Sunday evening in Australia, early Sunday morning American time?
Yeah, no, I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me on. As we were saying before the episode, it is kind of crazy to have, a Yorkshire Derby coming up next weekend over in England, and it's, an American and an Australian previewing the game, but it's the global game. It's just how it is these days.
Yeah, no kidding. It's it almost makes you laugh and in a sense feel good at how big the game has grown over the last 10 or 15 years, which is pretty impressive. It was a slow burn and a slow growth, and now it seems like every league in the world's taken off. So whole city start to the season. Sum it up. How's it going? Good,
Look,
bad,
it's
the ugly.
very much ugly, I think. It's an interesting one. I saw a graph the other day that someone put together following the transfer window to basically assess each club and how much of the squad had been turned over, how many of the players who played, presumably it was, minutes played last season versus still in the squad this season. And we were right at the bottom with something like 32% of our squad still in place from last season. So we've already signed 15 players in the transfer window and actually about to announce a 16th signing of a free agent after the transfer window is actually closed. And with that comes basically an entire rejig of our first 11. So new manager, new players. It's taking a while for those players to settle in. So I think we've got we've got 2 points on the board already. With a couple of draws, and then we lost to Leeds three draws, and then the loss to Leeds last weekend. So I think a lot of City supporters would say any points gained in August was a positive because of this overturn of the squad, which wasn't the end of the world. But at the same time, you're sort of sitting there thinking we still need that win, haven't scored too many goals. So a lot of work still to be done.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like it's been a rough go of things. And honestly, prior to recording, we were talking about both of us kind of think that this is an average league. There's not really any great teams. There's a couple of good teams, in the likes of Sunderland and even Burnley. But I think the rest of the league's kind of right on about bang average. So honestly, there's still hope.
Definitely.
It's one of these years where you could have a few bad results along the way, and it's not going to absolutely, like in previous seasons, it's not going to absolutely kill your season and just be like, well, we had that bad run of about 5 games, and now we're 12 points adrift, and all we're going
Yeah.
to do is maraud along in mid-table, which is a good thing, albeit an average season with all these teams in the league, doesn't fare well for whoever gets promoted to that godforsaken league, Premier League, because they're just going to see them back in a year's time. I want to hit on this for the listeners. So what's your match day like over in Australia? Obviously, it's really late at night when the games are on. What game times make it easier and what game times make it harder based on UK kickoff times?
Yeah, I think the supporters in the UK are going to hate me saying it, but I actually really enjoy those 12:30 kickoffs over in the UK because that's 9:30 at the moment with the way daylight savings is lining up. It's a 9:30 p.m. kickoff for us, which is basically prime time. So that's a great time slot. You're basically overlapping with the Australian sports are still finishing off their evening games. So you're basically you're coming straight into the football, and it's great. We've got a Facebook chat going between myself and all the other podcast contributors for our podcast. So what we'll tend to do is be chatting to each other during the game. So we do have that sort of communal experience of watching the football. So it's not it's not quite as isolating as it might feel. But yeah, definitely those 2 a.m. kickoffs, which, in the middle of winter around December, January, when the clocks have changed. So the 3 p.m. kickoff in the UK, 2 a.m. for us, they're the most brutal. That's definitely the ones where if you're on a poor run of results and you're coming up against a team such as yourselves or a Leeds or someone like that, it does become quite challenging to either stay up or get up for the game if you know you're just going to be sitting through a 3-0, 4-0 loss. But we try to do it. We try to make it most games. I think I was saying to you before the episode, it's maybe 90 to 95% of the games I watch live, but it can be tough at times.
Yeah, in my podcast partner Noah, I mean, I thought he had it bad when 12:30 kickoffs in the UK. He start at 4:30 a.m. his time. So yeah, he's of similar ilk, but he could, his day is just beginning. Your day is ending. So it's absolutely mind blowing. So to Friday night under the lights. How do you think it goes? And give us a couple of players that United supporters need to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one because coming out this side of the international break, a lot of the new signings hadn't even played a minute for us in that last game against Leeds. So I think whilst a lot of City supporters were feeling quite, I guess, unsettled by the start to the season, there was always the fact that, look, there's a lot of these new players that we haven't even seen yet. So to be honest, as much as your boys will be looking out for our players, we'll be looking out for them as well because we won't have seen them play. But in terms of the ones that have started the season for us, our attacking midfielder, Marvin Mellum, German midfielder who's come in, knows our head coach quite well, is already settling in quite well, scored a goal in the cup against your rivals in Sheffield Wednesday, is probably the one who is probably the most eye-catching in terms of players that we've already seen. Our striker, Chris Bedja, who's come in from Germany as well. He's 6'4", full of muscle. He's going to hold the ball up. He's going to be a handful for the defense. I'm not convinced yet if he's going to be very prolific, but I think he's going to cause a few problems just in terms of his hold-up play. And then I think it's the wingers that'll be really interesting, players that we haven't actually seen yet. So signed Abu Kamara from Norwich on deadline day for about £4.5 million. So quite a substantial outlay, considering we don't have any of that lovely parachute, money that you guys have.
Yeah.
£4.5 million is quite an outlay for us. So quite excited to see what he does, whether he gets a start in the game. And I think his name's Balumi, is another winger that we signed on deadline day as well. I think Leeds were interested in him, so it was quite satisfying snatching him from under their noses. So I think there's a few tricky wingers that we might play in this game and see how they go. But look, feeling optimistic in the sense that I think each game we've steadily looked a little bit better. Against Leeds was probably our best performance for at least a half, and just ran out of legs against them in a sense. So look, not writing us off in this game by any stretch, but there's just a lot of unknowns with our squad at the moment, so it's very hard to make a prediction in that sense.
Yeah. That's what's so hard about these beginning matches. And I know it's a cliche by every podcaster and, talking hairdo. You don't really know what you have until you play the first 10 matches of the season. And I have no idea what the hell to expect out of Sheffield United against you guys Friday night. And it's one of those deals where you're like, well, we could go and beat them, but we also could go and lose. So this smells to me like a draw, and we've been draw special. I feel
So have we,
bad saying that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so hard to draw on like what it's going to be, and it's you're just sitting back and like, I have no idea how this is going to go. And I feel like we're like the Preston of last season where we just drew like every single game. We did beat Watford and we beat Preston, but the other two games have been draws. I honestly can't shoot you straight and tell you what I expect out of this. I mean, if our players play to the potential, yeah, Sheffield United could go and win, but if we have to make some subs, which eventually we're going to have to make some subs, we're probably going to draw the game. So I think a 1-1 would be a fair shout, honestly.
And actually, thinking through some of your players, there's probably a few that catch our eye because Kiefer Moore obviously signed for yourselves in the summer, was very, very, very close to signing for us, to the point that I think the local journalists were basically announcing him as a signing, and then he flipped last minute to go to yourselves. Raksaki was one that we pursued for a long time, joined yourselves on loan. And Harry Sudar, speaking from a national perspective, Harry Sudar in defence for yourselves as an Australian. I mean, look, if he scores a goal against us, it's going to be a bit heartbreaking. But I was just thinking through your squad, and there are a few players to keep an eye on.
Yeah. It's funny now that you mentioned it. Yeah, every time I saw a transfer rumor this summer, it was like Sheffield United, Hull City, and just like either like Derby or some random team,
Yeah.
like Portsmouth were linked, and it's like, wow, us and Hull, in the same breath. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not slighting anything, but it's just it's crazy how many of the same players we're linked to, and Kiefer Moore hasn't really got going. I think he's got one goal. He's missed a whole shed load of them in front of goal. Harry Suter just started playing at the back for us. He's
a tall boy.
Yeah, he is. He is a very tall boy. And Alexa Callum O'Hare coming in through the window. We did do a good bit of business in the window. I'm just still hesitant because we don't have any depth. And I think that's a lot of the teams in this league. Once you get past your best 11 or your starting 11, there's not really much going on for depth in this league. And that's weird because in a sense, for the last few years, I like harken back to our season we got promoted 2 years ago. We had plenty of squad depth. Like you felt good when you brought changes on. Now we're bringing on the kids from the youth team. It's like, hopefully they hang on for either we don't throw it away and winning positions, or if we're drawing, we don't lose the game. So, it's crazy how things can change. Before we get out of here, I ask every single opponent view that comes on the pod. I know it's late over there, but on match day, do you have a match day go-to beverage?
It's probably what I'm drinking right now. I'm a simple man. Just a Coke and bourbon always does me quite well. It's probably my go-to. It helps with the late night, the lack of sleep. If I'm on the beers too much, I definitely feel it the next morning. I'm not as young as I used to be, so the bourbon and Coke kind of goes down a little bit better.
Yeah, that sounds actually at 7:40 a.m. right now. Doesn't sound too bad here in the States. Alex, give the people where they can find the podcast and listen to you from an Australian perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're on YouTube at The Tigers Down Under. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere else. And our Twitter account, I've got in the handle just here. It's at Hull City AFC Oz. I usually tweet out during the games, typically when we score goals, so probably not as much as I used to so far this season. But yeah, reasonably active on Twitter as well. So give a follow if people are interested in getting a bit of a Hull City perspective on things.
Good deal. And if you guys haven't done so, Red Half of Sheffield on YouTube, at Red Sheffield on Twitter, Red Sheffield on Instagram, Facebook. Follow me, CJarvis_13. And until match day 6, when I preview, I don't know who it is. It'll be Derby County. I will leave you with this: up the blades.